Hi. This week we begin our discussions by focusing on how to create the conditions for a meaningful and honest dialogue across racial and cultural differences. In response to the tragedies such as the murder of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and others, the tragic murders of the 9 worshipers at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, the marches and the demonstrations that have resulted, organizations like Black Lives Matter who are trying to call attention to the brutality of police against people of color, particularly young men of color. All of these things have generated all sorts of discussion and people saying there needs to be an honest conversation about race. But there are not many good examples of it. In the political world, in the media, in the entertainment industry, we're filled with examples of how not to handle differences. And so we don't want to follow those examples. As Brian Stevenson points out in his TED Talk, too often we ignore the experiences and the lessons of history, especially when they are filled with stories of lynchings, murders, slavery, land grabbing, police brutality, rape, and other forms of dehumanizing oppression. For many of the folks who have been marching and protesting, whether in Ferguson or Philadelphia or any number of other places, it's that willful ignorance to look at that history that has led to people being so upset. It doesn't matter that we may not have ever participated or been victimized in such cruel acts. Our history has shaped who we are and who we think we are. And in the next several weeks in this course, we're going to begin to explore that history. But here we want to focus on how to start and conduct a constructive conversation. Now, because I see myself on a continual learning curve when it comes to racism in this country, I regularly, about 2 to 3 times a year, make a point to attend a seminar or a workshop or a training on interracial dialogue. And I'm in an interracial dialogue group that meets once a month. And it's not uncommon for me to feel quite uncomfortable when the topic comes around to white supremacy and white privilege. And at other times, I have to confess that when people are getting worked up about certain issues, in my gut, I want to listen, I want to understand, but in my gut, I just don't get it. So I work every day to educate myself, and every day to try to use my position and my power as a white male for social justice. I cannot escape the fact that I am granted access, that I am given deference, that often I'm privileged to have access to information that comes to me just because I'm white. Now, fortunately, I have trusted friends who I have asked and who are quite willing to help me see when I don't quite understand some event or idea from another cultural or racial point of view. And these friendships, these conversations, help me see things from a different perspective. That is the power of honest and meaningful cross-racial, cross-ethnic conversations. Now, there are many things I could say about what leads to good conversation, but let me just mention 2 things from my perspective. The first is that when I begin to feel defensive, and I feel the doors of my heart and my openness beginning to slam shut, I have learned to say stop to that and to listen to that defensiveness and to work deliberately to keep myself open to hear things that might make me uncomfortable, but what I need to hear. And the second thing I've learned is the value and the importance of active listening. Not just waiting my turn to tell my story, but really listening. Listening not only to the words and the experiences, but the feelings behind them, to try as best I can to empathize with that other person and begin to see a situation or a circumstance from their perspective, even though it's quite different than my own. As we reflect and discuss the readings that were assigned for this week, as well as we reflect on our own experiences, I encourage us to explore how can we have an honest as well as constructive conversation about race, about cultural differences, about racism, and the struggles that come between people of different histories and backgrounds. You see, we can be honest, but in a way that builds walls and destroys the capacity to understand by just sort of getting each other's face. At the same time, we can be so worried about saying the wrong thing or offending someone that we never really get to the real issues. We're just sort of hiding behind a facade. We want to avoid those two, try the best we can to avoid those two extremes in this course. We are trying to do what the authors in Letters Across the Divide were trying to do. That is, find a balance between honesty and being constructive, between telling our story and really listening to the other story, so our dialogue can be meaningful, instructive, and constructive. That's our task for this semester, and this week we want to discuss what are the ingredients that go into creating that kind of honest and meaningful conversation. So I look forward to interacting with you and to learning with you on this very important topic.